You know, I had talked about going over her that I'll Never Stop Screaming book, which is the reason, you know, I actually decided to speak up and, and start calling her out on some of her lies. You know, I tried every other avenue first, but creating a channel was the only way I could be heard. So anyway, let's just start at the I think it's on page 1, actually. And it's talking about the review, which I'll tell you at the end here. It says, the one review of this book by far is by my aunt. I'd like to remind all reading that I can prove everything that happened in this book. And the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is well aware of a closed murder case involved. Okay, that is what she wrote saying about the book. And because of my review, which she states, let me say it again, she can prove everything that happened in this book. Everything. So, but she hasn't now, has she? None of it. Okay, then she goes on to second, she talks about how abuse, you know, cycles through generations and affects people differently, which is, you know, we know. And she says she's not telling my grandmother's, and to tell her story, she has to tell the grandmother's story, my mother's story, my siblings, and mine, she says, hers, using no real names for privacy. But at the end of this book, she gives everyone her YouTube, where her name, she's just not too bright anyway. She says, my grandmother, who I call Mima, was born in 31 to a monster of a man. I agree with that statement very much, because that's true. But she doesn't have a clue of the real story. And she says her mother would go on to have 11 more children, being beat and belittled all the while. Okay, her mother had 10 children total. My mother was the second child, that she was next to the oldest, which was a brother. There was 10 of them. Her older brother, he passed away at 16. My mother was 14. Her brother that came after her, he passed away with diphtheria when he was 4 years old. So he was the first one that passed away at 4 years old. And there's a story with that, and I'm not going to put it right here while we're talking about this trash that she wrote. Well, I'll tell you the real story another day if anyone's actually interested. So let me go on down. So that's the first lie, and I've got my mother's obituary. I have my grandmother's too, which tells about how many children. You know how they write them up, how many was passed away before and after and so forth. So, but I counted and recounted. There was 10 total. All right, and let's see. She says, she's talking about she was regularly beat, sexually assaulted by her father, and bore his child at the age of 15. Y'all know, I tried to discreetly talk about that in the best I could. You know, it's the one reason I find my mother so fascinating. She's not like, she never was like some of the women today. You know, she, like I said in the very first video talking about my mom, my mother loved her child. She loved her daughter. In fact, she loved her. She didn't, she just didn't worry about where, no one paid the price for what happened to my mom. She loved her, and she just, you never know. You would never know. But of course, little Miss Mary's got to just not even get the core truth in that. There's so much strength that she could have took from her grandmother, and she threw it away like garbage. And that is sad. But that, that again, like I said, is a different thing. And then let's see, she talks about her grandmother growing quickly. Okay, let's move on. Thankfully, her father died. Cancer, I believe. I don't know how she doesn't know. Something slow and painful anyway. And she went on with her life, marrying her first husband, who would turn out to also be abusive. He would give her 2 daughters, the younger being Mary's mother. Okay, her father did die of cancer. It was a rare cancer of his stomach, and it did slowly and very painfully take him out of here. He passed away, I believe I was 10 or 11. And my mother was by his bedside when he passed. You know, she had a forgiving spirit about her that truly amazed me all my life. I mean, I was, because I'm not that, I'm not her. I'm not that. She was a good woman. She was so good inside, you know. I'm not that, and I never will be. I would have loved to have been, but I wasn't. Then her first husband, she's talking about, is my father, and he wasn't abusive. He wasn't abusive. In fact, he was really he just catered. He gave her as much as he could, you know, with what he had. He had just come back home and gotten out of the military in the 50s, and he was staying in a boarding house across the street from the one my mother was in with her daughter and her daughter and her younger sister, which she took to Florida. And there again, that's another courageous story I would love to share with you if you ever want to hear it. And the two daughters is myself and Mary's mother, my younger sister. She writes, he was a heavy alcoholic and would constantly accuse her of cheating. He wasn't a heavy alcoholic. He drank in the Navy, he drank when he was young. But once they were married, there was no drinking, and there was never no drinking. I never seen either one of my parents when they back then drinking. I've never seen my father drink at all. Actually, never seen my mother technically drink. I mean, she did later in life, and she's very, very secretive about it. But she has nothing to do with any of this garbage. So that's a lie. Okay, just straight out lying there. And I don't want to read the whole little toilet paper pamphlet, but let's see, time cards, the cheating thing. I'm sure I don't know how she knows what they were arguing about when I don't know what they argued about. I know I can tell y'all some things about what happened when they did argue, but we never actually heard the words. You know, there was a lot going on back then. We'll go into that too. Y'all just let me know if you want to hear about it. All right, she writes, one night he put a knife to her throat as she slept. She worked late, telling her if her paycheck didn't match that he would kill her. No, let me tell you what happened. What this, like I say, she heard bits and pieces, but never the truth. My father was in 2 wars, and a lot of things happened in those wars. That when he came home, there was times where he would just go back, you know, and it would take, you know, my mother talking to him and letting him know. You know, and one night he held us all hostage in his room, in their room, because he was in his mind, you know, he was back in the war. It was extremely traumatic. You know, a lot of people died by his side. I mean, and he was young, so, but that part is not true, but I know she probably took it from some things that she heard us all talking about at one time or another. So give or take, but still life. Tell a true story, tell a true story. And then she wrote, it was a normal life for my grandmother. It was all she had ever known. No, you know, my mom had it rough, but she had it real rough when she was living at home. And back at that point in time when she met my father, he was, you know, I've showed y'all pictures. I mean, he was like just someone who just loved her to pieces. And, you know, he helped her get as many of her brothers and sisters that wanted to come to Florida, get to Florida. I mean, he was instrumental in that. He also got them jobs where he worked, and one of her brothers had retired from the same place my father did. You know, like she just exaggerated that pretty bad. And this is crazy too. It's just unbelievable. When my mother was old enough, she's talking about my younger sister, her mom, to take care of herself around 16, my grandmother finally got up enough strength to leave him. that's close. I mean, she did leave. I mean, I think she maybe around 16. That's probably true. I was already gone. I was, out there paying for my own apartment. Imagine that, Mary, paying for my own apartment, doing my work and doing, what you should be doing. Let me go back for something. I think she talks about my father passed away. I might have missed it, so let me just tell you this. My dad did not die of a horrible death like her father. I think she says it. I don't know if I've missed it or, oh yeah, it was right here. I did miss it. She says, thankfully, asshole number 2, which was my father, in her life, got cancer and he eventually died slowly and painfully. Not true. He did have cancer. I mean, he had, all my life he had issues, and we were always in the VA. I've told you the story about the Easter we were there. My dad had heart attack, and that's, there again, it's a long story. But what he actually passed away from, he had his bladder was removed due to cancer, but he was doing pretty good. He was doing good. He was in remission. The cancer was gone, and at the age of 54, he died from an aneurysm. He had checked into the hospital, and he lived in Bristol, Elizabeth in Tennessee, and he checked in to the hospital to have the stoma where, the bladder, the bag was, to have it unclogged. It was something to do with that. And during the night, he had an aneurysm that burst. So he died very quickly. And very quickly, when the aneurysm burst, he was gone. And for that, we were grateful. But it was just something, and we knew it could happen, but like it was just not expected right then. And most of you will know exactly what I mean. It just happened. But no, he did not die slowly and painfully. I mean, he had a lot of pain, but not as she indicates. And why she does that, I don't know, because he's related to her too. But she ought to take the good things from him, but she never would. Okay, so then she writes, sometimes cancer isn't such a bad thing. I'm here to tell you the truth is cancer is a bad thing every day, all day, anytime. There is no such thing as good cancer. And then she finds herself with a drinking problem. My mother did have a drinking problem, but it was a very private drinking problem because we're very private people. She also, no one actually even knew. Like, she was very secretive. So by her keeping it that secretive tells you what? It tells you that she was very productive. She continued to work. She took care of her family. And, she wasn't like, who. All right, so let's just be straight about that. And she did meet she met her husband, Larry, through a friend of my neighbor who worked up at a lounge. And that was a blessing because he was truly a good man, a very good man. And they moved in together, and they actually lived together for, I have to look and check the years, but a couple of years before they actually got married. Which is fine with me. I didn't care. I mean, I think you should get to know somebody. So anyway, he was good. He was very good. He wasn't like my dad was a big romantic. Like he always bought cards and things, and Larry wasn't like that. So a couple of times I would go buy cards and have him sign them and give them to my mom. But he was really good to her, and honestly, when he passed away, and my husband officiated his funeral, and the one thing he asked me was, "What do you want me to read?" And I'm gonna tell you something. It was pretty clear that the only thing that kept coming in my mind, and my sisters and I agreed, was 1 Corinthians chapter 13, which is referred to. It talks about the greatest gift is love, and what love really is. It doesn't boast, it doesn't get angry. It's actually to be the only thought about you that I could come up with. That is probably one of the biggest compliments I could ever give the man. and I loved him. You know, he was a good man. I wish I did. You know, he if you could choose fathers in this world, I was happy with the two that I was blessed with. Both of them taught me a lot. So let me go on before I get upset here. And you know, she writes he also died of cancer. That's not true either. He had cancer and he was in remission. He had been cancer free almost 5 years to the day. I mean, he was like a week away from the 5 year mark when he died of he had a massive heart attack. And he died at home. You know, he finally agreed to go to the hospital and they were getting dressed, took a shower, come out of the shower, and he died suddenly from that heart attack. It was a massive heart attack, which, you know, she's told some pretty crazy stories about that, all not true. And then she talks about my mom's children, which includes myself. And she talks about how far am I? Okay, 16 minutes. I'm going to stop this one and I'll come back with the rest of it, okay?